it is a little bit of a slow news day because it's the beginning of the year in terms of entertainment. But I did have some comic stuff I want to go into. This article, and then the new world, the Planet Hulk, but with She-Hulk and Cho. And it's up to issue 3, and it's just horrible. It's about like the U.S. Border Patrol when they were whole doing that thing with the reins on horseback. I mean, it's literally just, you could put the pictures next to each other. You look at this like, this is horrible, and this is horrible on top of horrible, and yet you people continue on with it. Yes, that's right. How are sales? I don't know. I guess people collect it. Anyway, so let's check in on Woke Comics. I'll click the links to join the channel, become a member here over on Subscribestar. So this article covers 10 comics that are no longer PC enough for today's climate of wrongthink and the political commissars. And you read this article, and the article it's sourced from, and you quickly realize that there's no path forward for comics at all, and probably for Hollywood as well. For comics, they have to keep them alive because the intellectual property rights, the way that works, they have to keep them in circulation or something. So they will gladly subsidize anyone just putting something out there just so they keep it out there. And it's going to be every bit as ridiculous as the stuff you're seeing. I check in on comics every few months, wondering about them, and like there's no point in even checking in on comics because they just, I don't know if they're exactly as bad as they were peak 2015 when they were just ridiculous, but they're still pretty bad, as I'll show you in the new Planet Hulk thing. So what happened was the rise of political correctness created a shield for people to raise in place of rational discourse, where you don't have to have a dialogue. You just say you're a member of a group on the Bolshevik hierarchy as established by the media, and it curtails debate. It's why always people, they place the shield, and I go, as a woman of color myself, as a marginalized and oppressed and disenfranchised poxwalks furry otherkin, like, okay, that preamble, that doesn't, it's not, I don't think it's probative and relevant to your central argument. I mean, it's not. Why would you? I mean, when someone says that, like, you just repeat it back to them, because it's kind of arguing from what is it, an appeal to authority, a appeal to emotion sort of thing. It's not probative and relevant to the argument, but they say it anyway because it's a shield. And the only way to argue with them is just say the same shield, even if you're clearly not the thing you are. Like I am myself. I am a woman of color, and it's like, what are they going to say? Oh, you're not. I mean, you don't look like a woman. Oh, that's very estophobic. I mean, you're just like, I mean, because it's like the point of like Gina Carano using the beep beep pronouns, but people actually do use neo pronouns. I mean, I think that was a reference to Star Wars, right? People do use, they're called neo pronouns that very well could have been lifted from Star Wars. Like, it's not absurd that she's doing it. So they're in this position of, well, we know you don't take it seriously. It's like, why on earth would she take it seriously? Anyway, you just have to say you're a member of this group as established by the media, and it's just a shield. And like the only way to get to like realistically, most people just don't want to have these kind of arguments. You hear someone go through their spiel, and you're like, in your mind's eye, you're thinking, wait, do I have to spend any time with this person? Because I'm gonna find a way to extract myself from this situation as fast as possible. So you can't argue from a place of emotion against somebody, a place of logic against somebody who's arguing from emotion. There's no path forward for a society that leaves logic behind. So this is only possible because the media pushes it and validates it. As soon as the media started using preferred pronouns, I knew the media was finally over, and that was like almost 10 years ago. So you don't arrive at correct conclusions, you arrive at politically correct conclusions, which is building a house on sand, and then the error compounds because they keep building new arguments based on an initial false one. And there is no future for comics because every group in America is going to be protected except for Christians or people of European descent. If you need to make you're going to notice like any bad religious figure is going to be a Christian of some variety. It's like, there are 2 other Abrahamic religions you can go after in America. And to say that would just be a needle scratch on a record because those other groups would very vigorously stand up for themselves. Anyway, or people of European descent, you can always go after. That's why, like, blonde hair, blue eyed becomes the default. Every bad character is going to have blue or green eyes. That makes for a very boring story because there's no willing suspension of disbelief. You have one fall guy who's allowed in comics is Mr. Blonde out of Austrian Central Casting. It gets old very quickly to the point where there are fewer and fewer storylines because something offends women. So the characters are drawn flat chested with less curves, and the poses are static and not dynamic. It just doesn't draw your eye to the image as much, and the butts are in shadows or covered by clothing to the point where it's obvious. And it's funny because like these are the most judgmental people on earth. If they have the opportunity to judge you or your sexuality, that's totally on the table, and body shaming you. But if you try to do it back to them, suddenly they got all offended. It's like you literally just this was happening. The Mary Sue did this article where some author was getting criticized and she was calling him like small dick energy, and he said something like, we have loose pussy energy, and the Mary Sue just lost their mind over that. You're like, it's the same insult back and forth. This is just two adults, engaging, to be fair, like children, but the woman started it and he just responded with a simple comeback, and it was like that comeback made these women lose their freaking minds. You're like, are you, what's the color of the sky in your world? They just said the same thing. It's just a juvenile insult back and forth, but the Mary Sue literally wrote an article about it. It's just as ridiculous as it sounds, but they don't admit that they made the small d comment until like 3/4 through the Mary Sue article. But they start with like he was telling these women they had loose pussies or dry pussies or something ridiculous like that, and then 3/4 into the Mary Sue article they admit, well, the woman started it by saying his book had like, okay, so like, what are you, Mary? So you're not even making an attempt at it. I mean, this is the most disingenuous article ever written. Anyway, so if you get on Twitter and mention that the art doesn't have the same energy behind it that it used to, like even something like this, that's a good image. It's got some spark behind it. The cat ladies and soy boys will call you a Chad Hugo Boss wanking to comics. But it doesn't get, nobody's wanking to comics. It doesn't get people to buy comics, and every year they buy less and less, and then the companies pat themselves on the back for getting rid of the wrong thinkers. The whole thing is insane. All it takes is any group but Europeans to complain, and even Europeans is probably like, maybe from the Mediterranean or Eastern Europe, you could play up that marginalization and oppression, or maybe Irish or something. Like, saying you're Irish really seems to upset them. And the thing is, there are a fair amount of Irish Americans. I'm Elizabeth Warren Irish. I'm 1/1000th%, and their complaint will be taken seriously in the comic adjusts. So in some comics, they end up with aliens being the bad guys, or guys who are wearing full bodysuits, as in the Planet She-Hulk, I should say, because even to them it becomes obvious that the blonde man bad trope is getting old. But there's no connection to aliens or people in full uniforms. I mean, the reader doesn't emotionally connect with it's like a bunch of CGI characters fighting CGI characters. You have to have a human connection in there. Art needs to be free, and it's obviously it's never, there's always been some constraints, and the excess of the 90s where there cuppeth overflow, but at least they were free to do that, and now it's completely screwed. And desexualizing the art is one thing. It might be possible as long as the characters are cool and the writing is good. But it's not. They're woke, insufferable feminists who are writing this stuff, and it very much comes across in the storylines. Or you have a Punisher character who there is no way to make the character today. It's a character that fights crime and is loaded for bear. So start breaking down the character. He's fighting crime, so who exactly are going to be portrayed as the criminals? Makes everyone very nervous. I guess in the early days it was the Italians, but even then it's a little ridiculous when it's always that one group and nobody else. So as the comic goes along, you get more and more blonde-haired motorcycle gangs to the point of absurdity. Then the skull and crossbones got adopted by the cops, so Marvel panicked and changed the skull to a Japanese demon skull and crossbones, which actually looks pretty similar, and he uses a sword instead. Well, there's so much Liberty Device crime in America. Oh, is it the objects? Are the objects getting up by themselves and committing these events? Is it? They're not. They're actually not. It's actually people. So now he's using a sword, and I assume he's still fighting blonde-haired motorcycle gangs. So the whole character is pointless. The decision is inspired by the recent criticism over the use of the Punisher logo logo by the military, law enforcement, and extremist groups. Keep in mind, an extremist group is anyone in America who's vaguely right of center and is of European descent and gathered together. Those are like the Proud Boys. I mean, they're not a white group, but they're like the left wing calls them an extremist group. And you look at the Proud Boys and go like, "Are you out of your mind? What have they done that's so extreme? Oh, they're against like grooming kids. Okay, so they're the good guys, I guess. Oh, you're not supposed to think that. Oh, what it was the other group, the Patriot Front or Alternative or something. They're the I think there's one in England, one in America. So they're against child exploitation. Yeah. They're literally Hugo Boss. Are you sure you want to make that argument? I'm not going to say anything don't say anything in the comments, but I mean that's a weird tenet to put that as the plank in your structure. So this is where we are now, where the comic industry says the military and police are openly the enemy, presumably because the police at least fight crime, and in this new communist world order, that is problematic. It's not even saying that they want to hold bad cops accountable or have oversight committees. It's just that cops are bad in general, and they needed to defund them, or they were saying that in 2020 at least during the BLM riots, the Summer of Love. It's funny because the first night of no, I mean, it's not funny. The first night of the BLM riots, four of those gentlemen took two girls and deleted one and snuggled them both. That was the first night of the Floyd Summer of Love. Four of those BLM guys did that. The first night, it was in and out of the media in about a nanosecond. Now, and I wish I could edit these videos. I probably would have edited that part out. Like every video is, I'm gonna have to edit these. I think like by the time I get a computer and start, I gotta get this super computer. I'm gonna start editing. Oh, you're kicked out of YouTube. Oh, well, probably should have got the computer earlier then. Anyway, they have since changed their tune about defunding the police because it turns out the inner cities need police, or else they turn into Detroit or Chicago, which modern comics would obviously never show. Hey, we're going to have a Punisher character, I mean like Luke Cage, and he's going to be in Detroit. Oh, that's like problematic because it perpetuates the stereotypes that there's crime in Detroit. There is quite a bit. Chicago too. People get offended when you use Chicago as an example. It's like it's in the top 5 every year in America. Detroit, admittedly, is number 1. I think St. Louis is up there too, but Chicago, it's in the top 5 every year. Oh, there are nice parts. Yeah, we're talking about the not nice parts. You want to have a comic book character that's the Punisher, but for Detroit or Chicago. Oh, yeah. I think over since the 2020 riots, the numbers have jumped up. It's like 2 or 3 love sessions a day. Deletions from this mortal coil. It's like you should set a comic in there. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna. The thing is, with a lot of these kind of comics, there's just no way to go forward with these comics. As I'll show you with the Planet She-Hulk comic, where it's like the first thing they're fighting the Border Patrol, and then after that they're fighting analogs for the Border Patrol on foreign planets, where it's like just aliens fighting aliens. I look at this like this just. There's no emotional connection to this comic whatsoever. After you got past the evil border. Was it Biden or Trump was in office? I don't remember who was in office. Oh, I think it was Biden was in office. Biden's evil border patrol, where they're on horseback and they're trying to corral up these Haitians who were like nobody ever asked like how did they sail to Mexico? Who paid for that trip? Don't ask those questions, bigot. This might have been too much for YouTube. God, do I make this again? I don't really want to make it again. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next episode.